Apophis.
Revelation 8, verse 10. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch.
Apophis Asteroid Apocalypse Episode 10, written by J. M. Conradi. Continued from Episode 9. The family was increasingly wary of moving around outside the fence of their yard, because of what they had seen from their lookout point to the south, where the major population centers were. The nearing sounds of chaos heard in the darkness of night did not help either. At 3 in the morning of day D+7, Sheila was on night watch duty when it happened. A large crowd was moving through their sparsely populated neighborhood and setting houses on fire, like a maddened mob. Now and then a person would be visible through the infrared scope, and they looked like they did with the telescope by night. It was not their apocalyptic physical appearance of wounds, burn marks, sick pallor, or emaciated frames that shocked. It was the eyes. There was no hope left, extreme conditions and utter abandonment by governments and media, they believed. From his apocalyptic research, Ian had said it was the crazed eyes of despair, before famine would lead to cannibalism. Sheila could see no logic or goal in what was happening that night. It was simply a rage of vandalism, to destroy the suburb. If resources or pleasures were gathered by it, those were coincidental to simple wanton destruction. The quiet of the past few days was belied by the sounds now and then, of screams or gunfire as the mob moved through. It was the desperate sound of isolated pockets of resistance by homeowners. Was the seventh day of bereavement the end of mankind's resistance to mass psychosis? This was more or less the same time, they later heard, that war broke out in Israel around Megiddo Mountain. Strange unmarked planes, a rarity while global fuel supply lines were spluttering, contested Israel's traditional air superiority in the area. China, perhaps. Given the lack of satellite coverage, many things about this period would be unclear, or even never get solved. Apart from the 4 nuclear blasts identified after Apophis, another massive blast struck outside Baghdad, near the ancient site of Babylon, but nobody knew where that came from. Nobody was there to test for fallout. Surely that was not an accurate hit by anyone, so was it a mistake, or a missile shot down, that obliterated Babylon? Whoever all the actors were, jostling for position in the chaos, almost all oil delivery and pipelines through the Middle East, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and surrounding areas grinded to a halt. Whether fuel delivery routes or history was the cause, sporadic fighting around Israel escalated into full-scale regional war. Brussels recovered sufficiently to speak, and Europe was ordered to stay out of the conflict. Russia and China didn't dare open involvement either, wary of each other's ambitions, but weaponry and unmarked technology participating were mentioned in later reports. If a warlord supported by China made inroads, unmarked suspicious-looking technology from somewhere would be used to weaken that force, to keep the war in balance. At least one U.S. aircraft carrier was providing limited help to Israel, careful to only take defensive action, and appearing to act without Washington. Sheila woke the others, upset by what was happening in the night. Taking turns with the infrared scope, they kept watch to see if their house would be attacked too. The mob sounded close, when two men appeared in the front section of their yard where the fence was low. They were doing something to the front corners of the house. The mob seemed attracted to sound in the darkness, so to use a gun would be suicidal, but arson could not be allowed inside their yard. Assuring Sheila that all would be fine, and she could cover him with the gun if needed, Ian put on their only, illegal in this area, bulletproof vest, and his helmet. Then he took his best long sword, and gloves from its special closet. Time to put all those hours of practice to use. He slipped out through a quiet side entrance and watched from the shadows. There were still only two men in his yard, but they were using fuel pallets and lighters to set his house on fire. He stepped from the shadow onto a wide open patch of lawn, and said in a growl, "Stop. This house is protected, you'd better leave." To scream at them could attract more mobsters. They were so young. They were smaller than him, but their actions were not as crazy as their eyes, wide and white in their sooty faces. Armed with knives, they quietly separated to attack him from two sides. As if sickened by the toxic air and rainwater of the past few days, they were slow. If handled well, the tip of a double-handed longsword can strike its target at 140 miles per hour. The tip can reach as far as 2 meters from the body of the swordsman. 20 seconds later, both attackers lay bleeding and groaning on the grass, and he was panting with exertion and horror. If they shouted for help, his family would be massacred. Silently he pirouetted between the two wounded attackers, stabbed their heads, turned them into silent, gaping corpses. Nothing except war would make modern man fit enough for sword battles, he remembered again, as the exertion made him feel faint. His family wanted to come out, but he chased them back. "Let's first make very sure there's nobody else targeting us." There was far-off gunfire, and they could hear the mad mob moving away in that direction. There were still some stragglers, and clearly the whole neighborhood was swarmed. How many thousands of crazed individuals were on the move, merely bent on the destruction of everything that reminded of a world gone by. Most were young men, but they thought they also saw some women in the throng. Where did they come from, and where were they headed, and, more importantly, why were there similar sounds far away on opposite sides of the city? Were several mobs prowling, looking for areas not yet burned down, by either the asteroid or by man, the destroyer? When they were sure it's safe, his sons moved the two corpses out to the street, to an area where there were 1 or 2 other dead bodies in the street. Yes, we are now barbarians too, Ian thought. We don't bury attackers, our only goal is to attract no attention to our house. Although he'd military service long ago, he suddenly felt nauseous. There would be no further sleep soon, so they made breakfast, the last fresh bread, now almost stale, and held a kitchen table meeting. "The situation is worse than we made ourselves believe, I think. The level of sunlight is significantly lower, the rain is occasionally toxic, systems of economy and government stopped functioning, and very large numbers of humans are in a hopeless situation," said Biff. "We need information about what is going on." "I am picking up a radio signal from the mountain reserve, in addition to seeing glimpses of activity up there," said Marius. "So, Ian decided to tell them everything about Plan B, beginning with that note from David that he already showed them. He ended off with, "I wanted us to first recover from the trauma of the worst tragedy in history, before telling you we might have to evacuate our safe house, but the time has come. If we go, it will only be temporarily. We will secure everything here to return later, maybe even return repeatedly. We will always have this place. And we did rehearse an evacuation plan, we just never talked about the destination. The mountain reserve is that destination. As club members we have a key to a gate in the reserve fence, and according to David's note at least he and some others we know, may be there. And there's fresh water. Their potable water supply was dwindling. Boiling and filtering water from the rainwater tank proved tedious, and the rain now had to be tested every time before allowing it into the tank. But mostly, the mobs made it unsafe for now. This is what lay ahead in future episodes, while the world adjusted to apocalyptic times, or the masses died leaving only the lucky, or unlucky, depending on your perspective.
Asteroid Apophis. Asteroid Apophis. Asteroid Apophis.